One of the most credentialing things you can do is admit when you're wrong, admit when you've made a mistake, or admit when you don't know something. I would say to people, I don't trust somebody who says they're an expert because they know everything. I trust them when you ask them a question and they tell you they don't know it. They don't know the answer to it. That for me is credentialing, because now I go, okay, they must be a real expert because they're prepared to admit when they don't know things. Good people, authentic people, totally respect authenticity in others.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they are always in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lembi, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. In just a moment, I'm joined by John Golden, the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer at Pipeline CRM. John's the host of SalesPop, a podcast that has racked up over 1,500 episodes. In our conversation, I'm going to ask John to break down the following for us. How do you future-proof your business without overextending? Why authenticity is the key to great leadership? And why John believes that your gut instinct is still your most underused superpower.
When it comes to making hard moves, both professionally or personally, nobody's ever 100% ready. So what advice do you have for somebody to make that leap anyways?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and nobody's ever 100% ready. But I honestly, and I think that's the thing, is like, I don't think we're ever 100% about everything. So, if you're about 80% ready, I think that's when you have to, take the plunge. And I think part of it is you have to ask yourself the why. Why do I want to do this thing? And if the why is strong enough, then that should compel you to take action. If the why isn't strong enough, then that could be the root of your hesitation. So I think that's the part of it, is to look at where's the hesitation coming from. And if you can find that and say, okay, there's maybe more things I needed to consider. But if you look at it and you go, no, I think I've covered all my bases, then sometimes you have to take that leap of faith. And I'm a big believer in the fact that, when you make a decision about something, it doesn't always lead. Everything we do in life doesn't always lead to a destination. Oftentimes, it's you take a path, but it leads to another path, to a destination, and then onward. So I think it's also the thing to do is to look at things and say, nothing is forever. So if I make this decision, either personally or professionally, what's the worst thing that happens if it doesn't work out? Right? Yeah. I'll learn something from the experience. It probably wasn't the right thing for me. Maybe it was there to teach me a lesson, but I can always do something else, right? I can always move on and do something else. So I think part of the paralysis around decision making is worrying too much about the future, as in, not just the immediate future, but the long-term future, instead of just embracing the opportunities. And I've always felt, certainly in my life and my career, I've never regretted any decision I've made, any opportunity I've taken, even if they haven't worked out the way I wanted them to. They've been such huge learning experiences. And at the end of the day, where we end up is the accumulation of all the decisions we made to date anyway.
So thinking about big decisions that you were thinking about making, right? And then using that philosophy, and is there ever an example that you can go back to where the why wasn't strong enough, so you pivoted and you didn't even go in that direction? Oh,
yeah. I had one interesting one when I was during the .com era, when I was in San Francisco, and I got a recruiter contacted me and said, "Oh, I got a great executive job at a .com startup." You could throw a stone and hit one at the time in San Francisco. But anyway, I said, "Okay, fantastic." So I went to the interview and I met with the CEO. It didn't start off very well because the recruiter actually had given me 3:00 as a start time, and the CEO thought it was 2:30. So I arrived in on time. No apologies, nothing, because I'm on time. And she was a little bit weird at the beginning, and then it turned out she thought I was half an hour late when I wasn't. So that was a good start. But then I interviewed with her, and then interviewed with her executive team about the position. And when it came back to her at the end, she said, "Well, what do you think about the job?" And I said, "No." I said, "It's a job that I said, I want to be candid with you here. I said, everybody I've talked to, this job is a composite of all the bits of their jobs that they don't like and they don't want to do. and it's all being put together in one position, which is destined to fail. Because instead of addressing these other issues, you're creating a position.
Now, did you figure that out from that interview, or did you know that going into it?
No, I didn't know going into it. I thought it was a completely different job, and I was really excited about it. But my level just went down and down as I was talking to people, and my gut instinct was like that this isn't good. Because normally, like when I gone for jobs and interviewed jobs that I've gotten, like, you know, I've come out meeting each person, you know, maybe you're not excited about each person. Maybe you're saying, oh, this person was really cool. That person I could see, yeah, maybe a little bit harder to deal with, but overall, like, I'm really excited. My level just went down, and then I just told them, I just said, I think this job is destined to fail. And the recruiter was furious with me on the way home. I got absolutely furious, and and I said, I'm sorry, that's how I feel. Interesting thing is they pulled the job after that.
You know what I think is interesting, and I think I've heard you talk about this a little bit, when it comes to selling, you know, having beliefs and values over just product all the time. And what it sounds like is your recruiter was just trying to make a transactional sale.
Yep.
Regardless if it worked for you or not. It was just money in her bank or his bank, and it was short-sighted.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was. It was precisely, she just wanted to put somebody in the position, take her, whatever it was. I don't know, at the time, the recruiting fees were even worse, and they were like 6 months' salary or something, whatever. Yeah, she just wanted to do that. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to, you know, number one, you can't force me, obviously. But second off, you know, I'm not going to sign up for something that I know is not right and isn't going to work. And why would I put myself in that position anyway?
So for somebody who, let's just take an example of right now where, you know, jobs are hard to come by and somebody's been unemployed for, let's say, 6 months. If they're in that situation, what advice would you give them? Take that till you find something else, or just keep looking?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say keep looking. I mean, it depends obviously on the individual circumstances. I mean, if things are really tough, and you desperately need the job, and you believe that, yes, this isn't a great fit, but I could do some good here. I could do something that, you know, I could be proud of, and maybe, you know, draw attention from other people in the future. Then I'd say, okay, maybe that's an option. But the fact is, Damon, as you know, is rarely does anything work out like that when you compromise and you go into something without knowing that it's probably not right. Everything isn't 100%. You're not feeling that good about it, but you're desperate for it. Those situations rarely work out.
I agree. And, you know, you brought it up a little bit, the .com days. And so, yeah, I lived it as well. I was here in San Francisco, 95. What a wild time. But let's go back to then. Let's talk about, how did you end up here back in Silicon Valley in the heart of the .com days?
Yeah, so it was. I got a job in Dublin with a startup company called CBT Systems that did computer-based training systems, and they opened up an office in Silicon Valley down in originally in Menlo Park, and it was sales and marketing and all of that, and for the US. And the company was growing, and I had gone across a couple of times I represent the product development department in Dublin, and, you know, do road shows and breakfast seminars and that to help the salespeople. And then one day the general manager called me down to his office, and he said, would you be interested in moving out to San Francisco, to the office out there? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? You know, I didn't really have any attachments or so at the time. And he said to me, so how long would it take you to get everything together and get ready? And I said, well, it's 11 o'clock. I'll be ready about 3 maybe. And he was like, what? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm ready to go as soon as you're ready. So that's how I ended up. I mean, it was literally one of those occasions when it wasn't on my radar, it wasn't on my plan. I wasn't saying, oh, I want to move to America. You know, it was an opportunity that came up, and I just thought, why not? It's too good to turn down. So that's how I ended up in Silicon Valley.
And for those who didn't experience the .com days or the .com bust, how would you explain it? Like, what it was like? And do you think we're living in a time like that right now that's similar with the whole AI situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very similar. It's very similar. I'll give you a recent example just from the AI world. If you saw, I mean, the amount of money that the amount of investment that some of these AI companies that are trying to create these AI SDR, sales development reps. So a real, an AI that sounds like a human would cold call you and do all of this. They've got so much money. We tested out these and they're horrible. Don't work. Horrible solutions. But some of the companies have got 100 million in investment. And yeah, it is, and that's very reminiscent of the .com. So for people who weren't there, the .com era in Silicon Valley was, as you said earlier, it was like the Wild West. It was every day you see a new .com go up, barbecues.com, whatever .com. And there were people, there was a guy who worked for me who a friend of his had a .com startup, and based on the paper money, the stock options and all of that, he bought a weekend lodge in Tahoe, and he had a big mansion in the Bay Area.
All my friends.
Yeah. And all of that. And after the crash, he ended up sleeping on the couch of the guy who worked for me because he didn't have any money. So the reality was in Silicon Valley that it was packed, and people just got caught up in this exuberance about, the old models don't work anymore. The old business rules, throw them out. You don't care. Don't worry about profitability. Don't worry about all that kind of stuff. All of the stuff that and I guess this is where there was a kind of suspension of, what would you call it? It'd be like when people just suspend their skepticism, right? They just buy in 100%, go, it all sounds wrong, but hey, I'm going to go with it because smarter people than me are telling me that it's correct. And of course, we had the whole implosion afterwards because it turned out that, of course, business rules, of course, like economics matter, and there wasn't so-called new economy. There were changes in it, but there were fundamentals that are still in place. And I feel, with the AI and even with the amount of VC and private equity money that's been pumped in over the last 10 years into businesses that are now so laden down with debt, that they're probably never going to be profitable or sustainable in the long run. I think we have entered. I think we were already in that phase. Maybe the cheap money is gone, but now with the AI is like another Wild West where just everybody's producing stuff and people are pumping money into it. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people are going to learn some really hard lessons.
I remember back in the day, I had learned it even back then, more brick and mortar, profitable, small. And my dad would always say, and I always wanted to push to expand because I had all my buddies were paper millionaires.
Yeah.
And he would say, look, you got to be careful. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
It's all smoke and mirrors, and they're not producing anything. Things aren't working. They're not making any money, and things will change. And we saw exactly that happen. And we saw a little bit of that a couple of years ago when it was all about growth. Yeah. And then the private equity and VCs, they kind of reverse course on that.
Yeah, they pivoted. Yep. And they suddenly went, about 2 to 3 years ago. Yeah, it suddenly when the cheap money started to go away, it suddenly became path to profitability, and now you have to show path to profitability. That was a huge shock, I think, for a lot of these private equity or VC-backed companies because they had never been told to even pay attention. In fact, they'd been let's be honest, they'd been actively told growth at any cost.
At all costs.
At all costs. Don't worry about the rest of the business. Don't worry what happens below the line. All of that kind of stuff, and of course now they've pivoted to path to profitability, and there's a lot of I still think, to be honest, Damon, I think there's a reckoning coming because there's so many companies that are never going to even get close to being properly run businesses or profitable or sustainable, and it's only a matter of time when these start to wash out. Because if you think about it, a lot of private equities or VCs or whatever, they may have 5 or 7 hold times for their portfolio businesses. So there's a lot of those businesses I think are going to come up to the end of their hold periods in the next year or two, and I think there's going to be a major washout.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in VC and private equity, and I mean, there's 20 portfolio companies. All they really need is one to hit.
You only need one.
That's all they need, right? So, what advice do you have for our listeners who are founders who can maybe what could have been done differently in the .com days that they could learn from to avoid in what's going on right now?
I mean, I think it's as we were saying. I think it's start your business off correctly. Like build a strong business, even if that means you bootstrap yourself. Maybe you don't grow as fast as you'd like to. Maybe you do it at a little bit more of a managed pace, but don't get yourself so deep into debt or into the hands of of investors. And if you are going to take on investment, like take it on with your eyes open. You should not jump on the first investor that throws money at you. You really need to consider, if you're going to bring in a VC or a private equity or whatever, you need to understand that this is like a marriage, right? It's a very different situation. And different PEs and VCs, they work differently. Some are very, very hands-on and want to be in your business. They want to put people in there. They want to be on it. Some are a little more hands-off. You have to really, really decide which type you're willing to or able to work with. And then you have to select them like you would select any other business partner, whatever you're going to get into. Like, be careful. So my advice would be to if you're going to go for investment, do your due diligence and interview lots and lots of, PEs or VCs. Contact portfolio businesses that they did exits with, or ones that they had in their portfolio at one stage, and ask the founders what their experience was like. Mostly, founders of business, mostly like they love to talk about. They'll give you that insight, but they can give you some great insights, of the ones that maybe sound like a fit for you and the ones that maybe aren't. So that would be my two pieces of advice. I would say bootstrap as long as you can. Build a fundamental business. Recruit really, really good people who can work through the early days, who are creative, who are resilient, people you can trust. The beautiful thing nowadays, Damon, as you know, is you don't have to hire a bunch of people if you don't want to. You can, there's a lot of technology you can use. You can use a lot of contractors to Upwork and stuff. You don't have to have full-time employees. So I would say add expense to your business in a very controlled manner and a very deliberate manner. And then if you think you have something and you want to grow and you want to take in outside investment, I would do a lot of due diligence. Don't just jump at the first amount of money that's thrown at you. And there's other ways of financing today as well that you can explore. There's some newer creative ways, but I would say be very deliberate in every decision you make, and don't just jump on things because they sound good, or if you're in a pinch and somebody comes and says, "Oh, I give you a lot of money to grow," don't jump on it immediately without your due diligence.
I think that's great advice. Be intentional.
Yeah.
The other thing that I like that you said is that reach out to some of the other founders and see what they have to say, because it may seem great, but you do some due diligence and see what's going on, because you don't want to be one of those 18 companies that are just throwaways. I'm a big believer that you should bring on a VC or somebody for your board who could add value beyond just the financial piece of it. Somebody who could mentor you and help you grow. And the other thing that I really like that's kind of interesting is we started off by talking about jumping for it, taking in opportunities. You're not saying not to take opportunities. You're just saying be thorough and think them through.
Yeah, think them through. I mean, you don't have to go into analysis paralysis or anything,
right.
But no, think it through. Just ask yourself if I'm going to make this decision. I say I'm going to bring on this. I'm going to partner with this VC or whatever. Just ask yourself, am I comfortable enough? Have I done enough research? Am I at the point? There's always going to be unknowns. You're never going to know everything you can talk to, but once you feel like you've done enough, you've done enough diligence, then by all means, if you still feel good about it, take the jump. But I would also say, if there's something that doesn't feel right to you, or you have some gut instinct, I think you also need to trust that, because I think that's one thing, Damon, I think we have de-emphasized over the years is the power of our instincts and our gut instincts. And people are always like, everything needs to be data driven and blah 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 and all of this, and you're going, yeah, to a point, but we still as humans have that gut instinct inside of us all. And if you think, and if most people in the audience can think about a time that you were so gung-ho to do something, but there was just something holding you back. There was just something that didn't feel right, and you went ahead and did it anyway, and it didn't turn out very well. I would always say is combine all your diligence with your gut instinct and trust your instinct. If there's something niggling there, it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah, I love that. When you were talking a moment ago, I was just thinking about a couple times where in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I went for it anyways, because maybe it looked good on paper, or other people told me this was what was right for you, this is what's right for Learn It. And I made that choice, and it didn't work out. The other thing that, when it comes to employees, which I think is great what you mentioned, is around hiring contractors or virtual employees. I've had a lot of success, and I've seen a lot of these first starting with these fractional CROs, CFOs. You can get this great talent for a fraction of what the cost is, and to come join you. And that's another great opportunity where you don't have to go all in with these huge salaries. Yeah. Especially if you have any doubt at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think the fractional resources is a great thing that's come up now, and there's so many, because we live in a world now where people want to work for themselves and they want to live where they want to live, and if you have a business where you can accommodate somebody who's remote and you can accommodate somebody who's fractional or a contractor, whatever, it's a fantastic time. I mean, I have contractors working for me now for, I don't know, 5-6 years. I never talk to them. I don't, they do specific tasks for me. They do them well. I don't even talk to them. I rarely, maybe once a year or something, I might send them a note on one of their holidays or something, and that, but they're just an efficient part of the process. And so you can find those kind of resources. And then with the fractionals, the fantastic thing is you could get somebody who you could never afford to be a full-time employee, but you can afford to pay them a fractional rate and have them work a little bit for you. And oftentimes, like, what they bring to the table is fantastic because it's great for them too, and they enjoy being involved with something new and they enjoy contributing, but they don't want to be all in either. So I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, you should, if you haven't already, you should interview Bob Spina, who's our fractional CRO. He ran the enterprise team at Gong.
Okay.
I could never afford a guy like that, but he's exactly all the things you talked about. He wants to work with several different companies, be his own boss. And then even at this stage of the game for me, what an incredible mentor that I'm able to work with. And that's a perfect example out there. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit though, John. Your executive journey. I was researching you, and one of the things that I really loved was that pivotal moment, maybe you could talk about a little bit, when a coach told you, why don't you go for a CEO role?
Oh, yeah. So, so my first executive position was at New Horizons. So we were talking a bit off air. And New Horizons, for those who don't know it, it was computer learning centers, right? A global franchisor, and franchisees would, have a territory, and they would do, basically computer training, mostly, software packages and all of that. And when I joined, as I said, it was my first executive level position. So I was confident. I'd always been confident I could easily do these jobs. But the reality, like when you arrive on, your first day and you're with the team, your confidence tends to go a little bit down because you're like confronted by reality. So I hired an executive coach, and literally the first session, she came in and we sat down and she said, okay, let's go through this. She goes, so you contacted me, and she said, now what's your goal again? She goes, I know what you told me, but I want you to hear from you. And I said, well, I want to be a really good executive. I want to be the best VP on the team, all of this kind of stuff. And she just said, oh yeah, that's great. Why don't you want to be the CEO? And I said, well, I didn't think about that. And, I said, well, I do someday, but maybe not. And she goes, no. If you do someday, then you need to start now. She goes, you're not someday that doesn't come around where someday you go, okay, I've done this for long enough now, I'm qualified. She goes, you have to start setting yourself, and that has to be your goal, not this. Because if you set the VP as being the best VP, because you can become the best VP. but you mightn't become the CEO because you've never set that intention or that goal, and you're not working towards it. So So I changed that completely, and a couple, say 3 or 4 years later, I took over CEO as Huthwaite.
That's a great story. I mean, there's a couple of things there. One, it shows you the value of investing in yourself.
Oh, 100%.
Right? I mean, that's so important. We could talk about that in a second. But also, why do you think that so many individuals, put like a artificial ceiling on them, on their own ability?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of things. I think some of that stems from a lot of it stems from, I think, your background and your childhood and your upbringing and stuff. I mean, some people, grew up at times when it was like, this, stay in your lane, right? Stay in your box, and don't, and maybe, come from, maybe just come from those family backgrounds or whatever, where, people didn't think you could do things like that, or were too quick to maybe put you down. So some of the stuff, can come from childhood, but then a lot of it is imposed on ourselves. We impose these limitations on ourselves because we don't spend enough time really examining our own abilities and spending time with really understanding ourselves and our own whys and what our own talents are, and we get too caught up in the in the day-to-day. And I think the other thing too is, and I think this is probably the biggest thing, Damon, is I think we allow our environment, maybe those around us, maybe we co-opt expectations of other people. And, the expectations of other people, maybe you...
What do you mean co-opt the expectations of other people?
I think sometimes other people sort of set our boundaries, say, oh, you're this or you're that, you're great at this,
Okay.
You're good at that, you're going to be this. And then we start to believe this, and we start to go, okay, that's where I belong. Not realizing that, they may have the best of intentions, but they may not be feeding you correct information. But you start to take this on board, and you start to own it, and you start to say, oh yeah, no, that's true. Like, I've reached my level, or that's what I'm good at. Yeah, I'm not that kind of person. And then the self-talk, if you think about it, how often have you said to somebody like, oh, well, why don't you go for that job or whatever? Oh, well, I don't really see myself at that level, or I don't really see myself in that job. And you go, what do you mean you don't see yourself? And what does that mean? Of course, you can see yourself in it if you want to see yourself in it. But we put these limitations on ourselves. So I think part of it is you have to take a look at how happy are you? I mean, how happy and contented are you really? And if you're constantly kind of slightly frustrated about everything, or you look at things and you say, I wish they would do this better, or they could do that, I wish this, then you've got to ask yourself, why aren't you that person? Why aren't you there making those decisions? If you really believe that things could be done better, done in a different way or whatever, you are actually robbing yourself and other people of the opportunity of your wisdom.
Is that because people struggle with the victim mentality and they just want to push the blame, and maybe they're afraid to stick their neck out there in case there's a failure?
Oh yeah, no, I think there's a huge amount of it is that they're afraid to stick their necks out because of fear of failure. And I also think, here's the other thing, Damon, I've talked about a lot, is I think fear of success is almost more powerful than fear of failure. Fear of failure is an obvious one, but fear of success is, how many times have you seen people, or even done it yourself, where you've gone, oh, this is a fantastic opportunity, you get all excited about it and you're about to apply and all this, and then you go, but what if I get it? And then I'd have to move over there, okay, maybe. Then I'd have to spend more time, then I'd have to do this. And suddenly you talk yourself out of even applying for it, for all these things that haven't even happened yet. And it's not the fear of failure, it's actually the fear of getting the job and being successful because of the changes it may bring to your life. And I think that's what holds people back sometimes, is they just get so wound up on the what ifs that they'd never even try. And I would say to people, well, just apply. You haven't even got it yet. Why are you even worrying about all of that? They haven't come to you and said, here, we desperately want you. Here's everything. You don't even have to make that decision yet. So why are you hesitating?
I love that. I mean, I'm definitely not a social media influencer, but I made a little video one time about having an imposter syndrome for even applying for a job. And that was the most likes and views I ever got was, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
And I tell this all the time too, because a lot of times I'll interview people who maybe didn't qualify for the job at all, but somehow they get to the interview with me, and I'm like, man, this person would be fantastic for the role. And then give yourself the opportunity to opt out if you don't want to be in that role.
Yeah. No, I believe, I mean, half the jobs in my career, I tell you, I probably didn't qualify for it all. I just went for them. And I think this is something that I also encourage people is like, you look at a job description and you say, oh, I only really match these two things. I say, forget it. The person who wrote the job description took that off the internet. They don't even, probably half of the things on there aren't even relevant. But if you've got a couple, just go for it. And yeah, I mean, and then sell them on your abilities and who you are and whatever. So yeah, I would honestly say I've applied for jobs and gotten jobs that I probably really didn't qualify for.
And then what I want to add to that is when you get hired for that job or you get promoted, then stop worrying if you belong, because these people believe in you enough to be able to do it. So go for it and do your best job. And another thing you talk about a lot, which I think is important when you come to these roles, is go at it and be authentically and genuinely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and be yourself. Absolutely, just be your authentic self. And sometimes, sometimes that can be hard. And I don't make any bones. I've had difficult times in my career where, shall I say, my candor hasn't been welcomed, and sometimes pointing out things that could be done better, or things that aren't working, or maybe things that you don't agree with isn't a very popular position to take. But I tell you, I wouldn't swap it. I wouldn't swap the short term or even medium term pain for knowing that you stayed true to who you are, and and you were your authentic self. And then on the flip side is people really respect that. The real people, good people, authentic people, totally respect authenticity in others, and that will get you a long way, because at the end of the day you want the respect, and you want the respect and the help of genuine good people. The other people, they don't care, they don't matter.
It's so important. Whether you're a leader, people want to follow people that they trust and they think is authentic and genuine. And also in sales, I tell a lot of time to my sales reps, get away from the slide deck. Stop trying to be somebody else. It matters less about what you say and how about you say it, and how you're trying to connect with people. I want to be respectful of your time, and I've loved this conversation. We've talked about a lot of great things, John. Going for it, right? Don't pass up an opportunity if that why is there for you. Yeah. The importance of authenticity of being a leader, and really looking at decisions the way you want to go about them, and going for it, like you mentioned, we talked about that a little bit. Mm-hmm. What else would you want to leave our audience with before we go?
Yeah, be prepared to make some mistakes. And when you make your mistakes, just learn from them and own them and move on. And that's I think is so important, because we live in a culture where people don't seem to want to ever own up to their mistakes, or ever apologize, or ever say sorry. I'm telling you, one of the most credentialing things you can do is admit when you're wrong, admit when you've made a mistake, or admit when you don't know something. I would say to people, I don't trust somebody who says they're an expert because they know everything. I trust them when you ask them a question and they tell you they don't know it. They don't know the answer to it. That for me is credentialing, because now I go, okay, they must be a real expert because they're prepared to admit when they don't know things, as opposed to somebody who's all the answers. But that's what I would say is, I would just say is just, be your authentic self. Take your chances, and when they don't work out, look on it as a learning experience, as something to build on. Don't look, and for goodness sake, don't waste time on regret.
Absolutely, yeah. Totally. I couldn't agree with you more. I think one thing we didn't even talk about, I'm going to have to bring you back for a whole nother episode on this, is that you've done a podcast, SalesPop, with I believe over 1,500 episodes, and I'm sure you would say the same thing. The greatest leaders that I've interviewed and most successful people are super humble, and they're not afraid to say, I don't know, and they share their mistakes, and they're vulnerable. And that's one of the great things about podcasting and learning and getting an opportunity to speak to these people. So I want you to come back and have us talk about that again sometime. Yeah,
no, I'd love to, because I love that. I love that concept as well. The part of humility, and the other part too is, Damon, is when people, I think, misunderstand this whole vulnerability thing. Sometimes they think, you have to be open about everything, and no, you just have to come off as a real person. You just have to be an authentic person.
Because here's the thing about that too, is that if you're, weeping and you're going overboard, you know what you're doing? You're making it all about yourself.
Yeah, precisely.
Like that crying CEO who got blasted for going out there and crying on air about letting people go and everything. It's just be yourself, be vulnerable, be confident, have fun, take chances.
In a situation like that, just be humble, be empathetic about the people who are losing their jobs. But something, you crying doesn't help me if I don't have a job, right? In fact, it probably annoys me more than if you just said, this is what we had to do and we're sorry, blah, 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 and move on, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. As we wrap up here, I want you to tell us where people can connect with you at, but also a little bit about Pipeliner and your podcast.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, John Golden, pipelinersales.com. You can find out more about Pipeliner CRM and SalesPop YouTube channel, or salespop.net. You can find the podcast.
All right, John. Well, you were awesome. And listeners, I want you to do me a favor. If you know somebody out there who's teetering, right? They want to make a career change. They want to do something different, but they're afraid to go out there and make that change. Send them this episode. They're going to get a lot of great value out of it. Without a doubt. And until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day. Thanks, John.
I often say if you have a bunch of issues and challenges or stresses in your life, write them down and then look at all of them and ask yourself, could I let this go? Could I let this go? And if the answer is yes, see if you can. If the answer is no,